I saved the alien vampire queen's little girl, and as a reward, she asked me to be her husband. The salvage run to Durrell 9 was supposed to be easy. One of those no-brainer gigs with a broken moon, minimal radiation, and plenty of abandoned mining tech just floating around like piñatas waiting for a good whack. Jace Farrell wasn't even wearing his lucky boots. He figured this was a no lucky boots required situation. A mistake, in retrospect. His ship, an ancient junker called the Rust Prayer that groaned like an asthmatic rhino every time it powered up, was clinging to the edge of the Durrell 9 debris field when the seismic tremors started. On screen, the crumbling moon cracked open like a rotten egg, magma bleeding into space, and the stabilizing tethers from the mining facilities snapped one by one. Of course, Jace muttered. Of course it's today the moon decides to explode. Why not? Next time, maybe schedule it for after I get paid. The ship shuddered. Something big and very angry looking slid past the viewport, trailing sparks and an indecisive fireball. Jace slammed the control panel. It buzzed back with a noise that sounded suspiciously like laughter. He didn't usually scream in zero-G, but this felt like an appropriate exception. Okay, change of plans. Quick in and out becomes quick out without getting vaporized. He launched the mag harness and reeled in the last chunk of salvage, barely a third of the predicted haul, when he noticed the anomaly, a blinking green dot on his scanner, buried deep in the structure of one of the shattered colony modules. The system flagged it. Life form detected, small, heartbeat erratic. Jace frowned. Well, that can't be right. There's not supposed to be anything living down there. He zoomed in. The signal came from a chamber that was somehow still sealed, nestled between two collapsed bulkheads. Oxygen levels minimal, temperature dropping. He could ignore it. It wasn't in his contract. It wasn't his business. He had 10 minutes before the gravitational tides flipped, and Durrell 9 officially stopped being a moon and became a glittery death confetti ball. He stared at the blinking dot. Damn it. Jace suited up, launched his tether, and shot down like a bullet made of poor decisions and half-baked altruism. The chamber was cracked open like a tin can by the time he reached it. Smoke curled up from a busted plasma conduit, and frost crusted the walls. Nestled inside, huddled in the corner of a shivering metallic cradle, was a girl, small, pale, wearing what looked like royal-grade cryo-weave, stitched with thread so expensive you could use it to buy a small moon. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing faint red. Not in the I have a fever way, more in the I might be a demonic entity way. Oh good, Jace whispered. She's spooky, perfect. She stared at him. No fear, just this weird silent curiosity, like he was a particularly stupid exhibit at a zoo. Then she held up a small medallion. It shimmered with geometric fractals, pulsing like a heartbeat. Hi, Jace said, because sarcasm was his only defense mechanism. You wouldn't happen to have a parent or guardian around here? Preferably one not melted into the floor? She said nothing, but she climbed into his arms like she'd been expecting him. The ride back up wasn't smooth. His tether line snapped halfway, forcing him to boost with emergency thrusters and navigate a hellish ballet of drifting rock, fire, and what he hoped wasn't a former mining supervisor floating past. They breached orbit just as the Rust Prayer's proximity alarms blared. Warning, chirped the ship's ancient AI, named VYXI, short for Very Irritable Xeno Interface. A massive unidentified vessel has appeared. Would you like to flee, panic, or make a poor decision? Can I do all three? Jace muttered, cradling the girl tighter. Outside, space bent like hot glass. A ship unfolded from nothing. A black lotus of steel and energy, petals opening with a shriek that bypassed his ears and screamed straight into his thoughts. The Rust Prayer jerked violently. Systems went offline. Lights flickered. Vixie let out a dramatic sigh and shut herself down. Well, that's not ominous, Jace muttered as the tractor beam locked on. The girl hadn't blinked once. He was dragged through a shimmering port into the belly of the Leviathan. The dock smelled faintly of cinnamon and ozone. A dozen figures stood formation, wearing crimson armor that hummed like it was alive. One stepped forward, helmet retracting with a hiss. She was tall, ethereal, beautiful in a way that made your brain short-circuit slightly. Long, pale hair braided with starlight, skin that shimmered like moonstone, and ears, long and elegantly pointed, that twitched ever so slightly when she looked at him. "Pilot," she said. Her voice made gravity forget how it worked. "You carry the royal air." Yes, Jace answered, trying not to look directly at her in case he melted. "You rescued her from the ruins of Durell 9. I mean, technically yes, though rescued is a strong word. I didn't drop her, if that's what you're asking." The girl wriggled down from his arms and marched straight to the Queen's feet. She looked up at the woman and said her first word since the whole mess began. "Mother." Jace's stomach folded in on itself. "Oh no!" The Queen's face barely changed, but something in the air did. It became thicker, like reality held its breath. "You have done what no one else could," she said, eyes glowing faintly. "You saved my daughter, the last of my blood. According to the laws of the Rixian Accord, you are now entitled to her protection and the traditional reward." "Okay, great," Jace said, hopeful. "Maybe a medal, or a ship, or I offer you my hand in marriage." A long silence followed. Even the glowing wall panels seemed to dim in disbelief. "I'm sorry," Jace said slowly. "Did you just propose to me?" "It is law." He blinked. "Right, law, sure. Of course, space law, the most romantic kind." Behind him, Vixie rebooted long enough to whisper, "I ship it," before dying again. Jace looked from the glowing child to the absurdly powerful vampire queen, then up at the ceiling, as if hoping someone up there had answers, or at least a manual. "Well," he said, smiling in the face of cosmic absurdity, "guess I should have worn the lucky boots." Jace opened his eyes to find himself wrapped in what could only be described as the love child of an opera curtain and a luxury coma. The bedding beneath him was so soft he briefly considered the possibility that he died and been reborn as a pampered mattress pet on a rich asteroid. The ceiling above shimmered with 1,000 tiny lights forming slow-moving constellations, which was a beautiful effect if you ignored the fact that one of the constellations looked suspiciously like a squid flipping him off. He groaned and sat up. The room didn't have corners, just curves. Everything gleamed like it had been buffed by a sentient cloud with OCD. The walls were the sort of chrome that changed color depending on your mood, or maybe its mood. He hoped it wasn't judging his morning face. "Okay, not dead, just kidnapped. Again, second Tuesday this month. I'm setting a record." The door opened with the hiss of a polite snake. A figure walked in, draped in robes that sparkled with faint circuitry, like her outfit had been sewn by a bored AI with a flair for fashion drama. She looked humanish, 2 eyes, a nose, the standard face package. But her ears were long, angled back like swept wings, and twitched subtly with each of his movements. She also looked entirely too amused. "You are awake," she said, and her voice was a glass of cool water poured in slow motion. "How satisfactory." "Right. Hello. Quick question. Where's the terrifying vampire queen who proposed marriage to me after I saved her kid from a collapsing moon? Because I've been running that through my head for the last hour, and I'm starting to suspect I hallucinated it." "That was no hallucination," she replied with an infuriating calm. "You are now consort-elect of her sovereignty, Ilaria Vey, Blood Queen of Rix, Keeper of the 5-star Threnodies, Heir of the Umbra Codex, Breaker of..." "Okay, wow, that's a lot of nouns." "She's fond of titles." "I can tell." The woman's ears twitched again. "My name is Loren. I am the Queen's Vizier. I will be handling your integration." "Is that what we're calling it? Integration? Not imprisonment?" "You are not imprisoned, Mr. Varel." "So I can leave?" She blinked. "No." Jace sighed and rubbed his face. "Thought so." "Okay, Loren. Let's say I entertain this absurd new reality where I'm apparently betrothed to an interstellar monarch with a penchant for surprise nuptials. Can you explain why this is happening, besides cosmic comedy? You save the heir. She bears the mark of the old blood. Ancient law binds your fate to hers now. Only by bonding with the royal line can the protection right be activated. Otherwise, her life remains forfeit to any who seek the throne." So this is about politics, and blood, and prophecy, and tradition, but mostly politics. And there's no way to, I don't know, nullify the right? Not unless you wish to challenge it by trial. He perked up. Trial by jury? She smiled slightly. Trial by orbital combat, with lasers. Okay, less charming. Jace stood and tried to stretch, only to find his left leg had fallen asleep, or possibly died. He limped dramatically for sympathy and got none. I need a drink, he muttered. Loren gestured toward a recessed panel. It opened to reveal a crystalline decanter and a set of hovering cups that arranged themselves midair. He poured a glowing blue liquid into one, sniffed it, and took a cautious sip. It immediately tasted like betrayal and blueberries. Okay, that's actually really good. Still hate everything else, but that helps. Another hiss announced the arrival of Ilaria herself. She entered without ceremony, barefoot, wearing a tunic woven from what looked like liquid dusk. Her eyes locked onto his, unreadable, powerful, and ever so slightly amused. I see you're acclimating. Jace took another sip and gestured with the cup. Stockholm Syndrome kicks in faster with good drinks and no prison bars. You mock, but you're alive. And so is my daughter. Few have accomplished as much. She moved closer, her presence magnetic and unsettling, like standing too close to a dormant engine that might still be running. You must understand, she continued, I did not choose this path. The right is ancient. If I could protect Vexa without binding you to me, I would. You're not exactly selling this. It is not a sales pitch. He sighed. Right. Because that'd be romantic. Hey stranger, thanks for saving my kid. Want to legally bond your soul to my immortal bloodline and never see your home system again? Real hallmark material. Ilaria tilted her head. Would you prefer a ceremony? I can provide doves, or venomous starlings if you like a challenge. Tempting. Behind her, the small figure of Vexa peeked around the corner. She was wearing a tunic 2 sizes too big and carrying a small bot in one hand, an assistant drone that chirped and squeaked helplessly as she gnawed gently on its corner like a teething puppy. Your offspring is chewing on expensive technology, Jace pointed out. She finds comfort in it, Ilaria said, and terrorizes fewer guards that way. Vexa waddled up and stared at Jace like he was a math problem she hadn't solved yet. Then with unsettling deliberation, she climbed onto the bench beside him and leaned against his arm. Ilaria raised a brow. She has accepted you? Yeah, he said, not sure if he should be honored or terrified. I'm like a couch that talks. She bit a diplomat last week. This is progress. The rest of the day was a blur of half-explained customs, overwhelming architecture, and a dinner that involved 12 forks and a singing bowl of jelly that judged him every time he reached for the wrong utensil. At one point, the Queen's War Council dropped by and asked his opinion on defensive grid placement over a neutron star corridor. He suggested, don't go near the exploding death marble. They nodded solemnly and took notes. Later, in a private chamber far too large for one man and his existential crisis, Jace lay on a bed the size of a small shuttlecraft and stared at the ceiling stars again. He could still smell her perfume, something floral but ancient, like a memory that wasn't his. He could still hear Vexa humming a song with no rhythm but perfect menace, and he could still feel the weight of what he'd been pulled into. You're a janitor with a license to scavenge, he muttered to himself. Now you're engaged to a space queen with lethal cheekbones and a child who may or may not be part thermonuclear. He turned onto his side and mumbled toward the dark. Well, Mom always said I'd marry up. Jace woke to the gentle sound of drums. Not actual drums, he checked, but the internal, psychic kind that signaled something had gone terribly, cosmically wrong. He sat up, hair sticking in 5 directions, and squinted at the glowing glyphs floating in the air over his bed. They pulsed red and read, pre-ceremonial briefing imminent. Clean yourself, scavenger. Subtle, he muttered. The hygiene chamber, what peasants like him would have called a bathroom, was full of sleek surfaces and zero privacy. He touched a panel and was immediately doused by a cloud of fragrant vapor and tiny scrubbing nanodrones that got into places he didn't even know existed. One of them made a judgmental clicking noise before exploding from contact with what might have been leftover mining grease. 10 minutes later, squeaky clean and mildly traumatized, he was being dressed by a floating apparatus called the Attire Optimizer, which had opinions. Strong ones. "No, I don't think I need a cape with laid flames on the hem. Thanks." "Disagree," said the machine, and proceeded to fasten it anyway. By the time he was escorted into the ceremonial hall, Jace looked like a cross between a space duke and a walking pyrotechnics hazard. He smelled like elder fruit and starlight. His boots clicked against the crystalline floor with the kind of resonance that said, "This man has no idea what he's doing, but damn if he's not committing to it." Ilaria waited at the far end, poised like a sculpture the universe regretted making too attractive. Her robes flowed with coded light, shifting patterns that whispered in languages he couldn't understand, but was fairly sure insulted him once or twice. Vexa stood beside her, a tiny terror in formal wear, hair slicked back like a tiny galactic mob boss. Jace reached them and bowed, because it felt right, and also because the cape was dragging him slightly downward. "You clean up adequately," Ilaria said, her eyes scanning him with clinical amusement. "Thanks," he replied. "You look like a divine entity accidentally stumbled into a fashion show. I shall interpret that as a compliment. I was trying to compliment you, and yet you sound surprised it worked." The room filled with dignitaries from 20 systems, some of whom had more tentacles than heads. A sentient cloud hovered ominously in one corner, raining slightly on an ambassador who didn't seem to mind. A choir of 5 simultaneously sang the anthem of binding, while telepathically projecting thoughts of loyalty, unity, and mild nausea. Loren appeared at his side. "Try not to faint during the rite. It is considered rude." "Got it. Stay conscious. Don't cry. Don't throw up. Classic wedding rules. Also, don't blink during the eye lock." "What's the eye lock?" "You'll know when it starts." Terrific. A horn blew, though Jace couldn't tell where it was coming from. Possibly someone's mouth, possibly the walls. The atmosphere thinned slightly as the entire room shifted dimensions. Not metaphorically. The actual reality layer adjusted, revealing the Nexus thread, a glowing arc that hovered between Jace and Ilaria. It pulsed with ancestral energy and possibly bees. It was hard to tell. Ilaria stepped forward, voice calm and resonant. "Jace Varel, do you enter this bond willingly?" He glanced at Vexa, who stared at him with her unreadable little face, holding the medallion he'd seen in the ruins. She gave him a solemn nod, or possibly a death warning. Tough to say. "I mean," Jace said, "I could say no and die in space, or say yes and get free room service and the protection of an ancient murder empire." The room stared. "Yes, sorry, I meant I do." The eye lock began. Twin beams shot from Ilaria's eyes in his own, connecting them in a web of starlight. His brain tingled. Then it flashed. He saw glimpses of her past. Battlefields, victories, losses, a pet lizard the size of a tank. He showed her his memories. Childhood on a junk moon, ramen for 9 years straight, the time he kissed a girl behind a waste processor and almost fell in. When it ended, they were both panting slightly. Someone in the back clapped, unsure. A thin crown appeared above Jace's head, hovering like it wasn't quite convinced of this whole affair. It adjusted itself twice before settling. "It is done," Loren announced. "The bond is sealed." Jace blinked. "That's it," Vexa grinned. "Now you get to meet the in-laws. Please tell me you're joking." She wasn't. 5 minutes later, Jace was in a diplomatic lounge surrounded by Ilaria's extended family, which turned out to include an undead warlord uncle who refused to stop dueling the furniture, 3 cousins who communicated only in chimes, and a matriarch who kept offering him things that might have been food or possibly living contract proposals. "So," said the warlord, polishing a blade with someone's napkin, "you're the meatbag who stole our queen's favor." "Technically, I saved her daughter," Jace said, sipping something that tasted like carbonated lava. "Same thing," the warlord grunted. "You stab anyone for her yet?" "Not yet." "Disappointing." Later, after narrowly avoiding a ritual wrestling match and escaping the affections of a very forward cousin who claimed to be able to smell loyalty, Jace wandered the upper decks for fresh air. Illyria found him leaning on the observation rail, staring into the sea of stars. You survived. Barely. One of your uncles tried to arm wrestle my soul. He's very traditional. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Jace asked, does this whole thing ever get less overwhelming? She looked at him. Not really, but you'll adapt. Any tips? Don't die. Helpful. A soft thump announced Vexa's arrival. She plopped between them, holding a piece of stolen cake and looking supremely unrepentant. You stole that from the high table, Illyria said mildly. Vexa shrugged. They were slow. She offered a bite to Jace, who took it with mock reverence. To our glorious and terrifying union, he said, chewing. May it last long enough for the next disaster, Illyria replied. From somewhere below deck, something exploded. They didn't flinch. Jace sighed. Right on schedule. The explosion, as it turned out, had originated from the diplomatic kitchen. More specifically, from an over-enthusiastic attempt to recreate a dessert called supernova fizz cake, which involved unstable yeast, a miniature fusion core, and the general hubris of beings who hadn't had their eyebrows in centuries. It took 2 hours, 3 hazard droids, and 1 exorcism to clean up the mess. Jace only narrowly avoided being drafted into the culinary tribunal by pretending to faint and hiding behind a particularly judgmental tapestry. By the time he'd escaped, he found himself in a corridor that didn't seem entirely convinced it wanted to stay in one dimension. The walls flickered between iridescent marble and some kind of vibrating organic membrane that occasionally muttered about taxes. Okay, he said to no one. This is what I get for marrying into royalty. Weird walls and dessert terrorism. He tapped the comm embedded behind his ear, hoping to reach Loren for directions, but instead was met with static and a voice that said, all routes are currently in flux. Please remain confused until stabilization completes. The hallway elongated, just slightly, enough to make him walk faster, then slower, then backwards. I swear, he muttered, if this thing loops me back to the ballroom, I'm going to scream in lowercase. A soft hum preceded the sudden appearance of Vexa beside him, materializing from a hidden panel like a tiny gremlin with diplomatic immunity. She handed him a small device. What's this? He asked. Anti-maze puck. Mom says you'll get lost without it. He turned it over. It was shaped like a flattened orb and made a high-pitched sneeze when shaken. Are these supposed to sound allergic? Number yours is just sensitive. They continued together through the shifting hallway. The puck occasionally beeped and emitted sarcastic sighs when Jace took a wrong turn. So, he said, how are you holding up, kid? Adjusting to not being kidnapped lately? She shrugged. Less fun now. Guards follow me everywhere. Tried to ditch one in the waste recycler yesterday. Did it work? Mostly. He's still a little green. They reached a sealed doorway labeled Strategic Deck. Authorized personnel only in a dozen languages, including 2 that stung his eyes. Why are we here again? He asked. Vexa grinned. You're authorized now. Married perks. Plus, you need to meet the council. The council? He echoed warily. They make decisions, sometimes good ones. Before he could protest, the doors whooshed open and they stepped into a room full of beings who looked like they'd never smiled voluntarily. Around a long crescent table sat advisors, admirals, and at least one sentient chair who refused to be sat on. Loren stood at the far end, hands behind her back, face unreadable. Illyria entered moments later, calm and regal, and inclined her head toward Jace like she'd ordered his presence, and was mildly surprised he'd arrived on time. The consort is here, she announced. I still vote we call me something less royal, Jace muttered. What about guy who married the queen, or honorary idiot? No one laughed, except the chair. Loren cleared her throat. The situation involves a coded transmission intercepted near the Halon Rift. Origin unknown. Content disturbing. A hologram activated in the air, displaying a field of stars distorted by gravitational tides. The image crackled. A voice spoke, garbled and laced with static. Warning. System failure. They're not what they seem. Protocol 10. Do not trust. The feed ended with a shriek that wasn't entirely technological. That, said an admiral with cybernetic teeth, came from an uncharted vessel drifting near forbidden territory. Jace blinked. Define forbidden. Loren gestured. Area prohibited by the Treaty of Pulsar 9. Site of a collapsed empire. No one returns from there. Excellent, he said. So obviously we're going there. You catch on quickly. Wait, what? You are bonded to the royal line, said Ilaria. As such, your presence on missions of ancient significance is customary. Can I opt out? No. Vexa high-fived him. You're gonna love space ghosts. Space what? Preparations were made swiftly, which in Rixian terms meant a week of elaborate planning, 8 rituals, and a ship named Celestial Loophole, which Jace took as a bad omen wrapped in sarcasm. Their crew included a pilot named Jin, who claimed to have crashed 12 ships and blamed all of them on emotional turbulence. A linguist named Brute, who looked like a pine cone with arms and smelled like wet libraries. And Tiki, a spherical AI drone with the personality of a tax auditor and the voice of an exasperated grandmother. During liftoff, Jace strapped in while Jin spun the ship like she was trying to mix soup. Relax, she said as the stars blurred around them. I only lost 1 kidney this way. Yours. Someone's. 3 hours into the flight, Brute offered him a data crystal filled with pre-collapse literature from the Lost Empire. Great, Jace said. Light reading. He inserted it into the console. The hologram displayed a text titled, A Treatise on Forbidden Stars, How Not to Die When Gods Get Bored. The first page read, Step 1, don't go near the forbidden stars. Step 2, better be chocolate, he muttered. They reached the Hylon Rift on the 3rd day. It was beautiful in the way black holes are beautiful, massive, unknowable, and just slightly smug. The abandoned vessel drifted nearby, a jagged silhouette covered in frost and silence. Jace stepped into the airlock with Ilaria and Vexa, suited up and armed with a flashlight that blinked, probably safe in green. The moment they entered, the silence pressed in. The ship interior looked like it had been melted, frozen, then gently insulted. Walls twisted. Lights flickered in patterns that suggested a migraine. Tiki hovered beside him. Atmosphere is breathable, probably. No known toxins, just unknown ones. Fantastic. They followed the corridor deeper until they found the source of the signal. A control room with a shattered console, and something scrawled on the wall in what might have been rust, or maybe warning ink. It read, They remember who forgot them. That's not ominous at all, said Jace. Can we leave? Too late. The console flickered. The ship spoke, and it knew his name. The console crackled again, lights spasming like they couldn't decide between Morse code and a nervous breakdown. The words that followed were disjointed, mangled, and deeply unpleasant. Ace. Varel, the Echo. Jace froze, flashlight lowering. Okay, that's new. I've never had an abandoned ship flirt with me. Ilaria stood to his left, completely unbothered by the voice from beyond the metaphysical grave. It's not flirtation, it's echo memory. Fragments of consciousness stored in hyper-recorded data loops. That makes me feel so much better. Wait, what if it is flirting? Is it too late to change my name to Dave? The console flared again, and this time a shape bloomed above it. A ragged, translucent outline of a humanoid figure. Lanky, twisted slightly, eyes like collapsed stars. Its mouth was a smear of light, and when it opened, the air got colder. Still sounds like my last blind date, Jace muttered. Vexa had taken 3 steps closer, entirely unafraid. It's a memory construct, she said. A psychic backup, but it's glitched. The hologram spasmed again, emitting static like a growl. We told D them, not to forget, not to bury. Who's we? Jace asked the air, as if demanding clarity from a ghost ship wasn't objectively ridiculous. The image blurred, then sharpened. 3 rings, a triangular crest, a planet split by a vertical fracture. Jace felt the symbols push into his brain like a bad migraine and a tax audit combined. I know that symbol, Ilaria said. It's not just a dead empire, it's precursor. Jin's voice squawked in over the comm, filtered with static. Hey, not to rush the paranormal bonding session, but the ship just went full lockdown out here, and my controls are throwing tantrums. You've got about 20 minutes before I abandon you out of self-preservation and spite. The lights flickered again. The hologram grinned, or maybe glitched, hard to say. They locked us in. Now we lock them. And with that, the ship trembled. Not subtly, not metaphorically. It shifted. The corridors twisted like intestines. Doorways vanished, and the hallway they came from folded into itself with a slurping noise that made Jace reevaluate his dinner. Oh great, Jace said. Haunted ships got an attitude. Ilaria activated a blade from her wrist gauntlet, the energy edge humming with lethal purpose. No more delays. Find the central node. Define central node, he said, dodging a pipe that dropped from the ceiling and hissed at him. Big glowy thing that pulses ominously, Vexa said, skipping ahead like this was a day trip to a cursed amusement park. As they hurried deeper, the architecture changed. What began as fractured starship corridors turned into smoother, stranger surfaces, black stone laced with circuitry, walls that hummed with memory. The air itself buzzed, faintly singing in tones that reminded Jace of lullabies from childhood he'd never actually heard. Did this ship merge with something? He asked. Ilaria gave a tight nod. Possibly a precursor artifact. Their tech adapts. It grows. Sometimes it thinks. Well, that's horrifying. So we're inside a sentient, haunted, spiteful ancient spaceship with abandonment issues. Correct. Just wanted to make sure my anxiety wasn't inventing that. They reached a chamber that spiraled inward like a black hole drawn by someone who'd never liked circles. In the center stood a spire of shimmering crystal wrapped in strands of light like veins. Beneath it, a console waited, bigger, older, awake. The spire pulsed. Memory core, Vexa said, stepping forward. Should we touch it? Jace asked. No, Ilaria and Vexa said in unison. He touched it anyway. There was a flash. No, more than that. A whole moment stretching into his mind. He saw cities carved into moons, spires rising from oceans, machines that whispered songs older than stars, then screaming, a voice crying out as it was forgotten. A civilization deleted from existence, not by war, but by erasure. They'd sealed themselves into nodes like this one, desperate to preserve something of who they were. When he came back, he was on the floor, eyes stinging, mouth dry. You idiot, Ilaria said, hauling him upright. You bonded with it. What? Number okay, yes, but it was shiny and I was curious, and I didn't see any danger signs except all of them. The room shook again. The node blinked, and suddenly a door appeared. Well, said Vexa, you unlocked something. Or doomed us. Either way, good job. They entered a vault filled with capsules, dozens, maybe hundreds. Inside floated preserved forms, not quite human, not quite alien. Their bodies glowed faintly, suspended in whatever stasis tech the precursors had used. They're not dead, Jace whispered. No, Ilaria said, reading the inscriptions. They're in memory lock, waiting to be restored. One of the pods flickered as they passed. The being inside shifted. Jace froze. Okay, now that I did not do. They're waking up, Vexa said. Something about you triggered the sequence. The hologram appeared again, fainter this time. You remembered. It smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just sadly. Now the others will know. Before Jace could ask who the others were, the ship began transmitting, frequencies scattered across nearby systems, sending out bursts of code and encrypted signals. You just rang the dinner bell, Jin's voice snapped in his comm. Half the scanners in this sector just lit up. Get back now. They didn't run. They sprinted. Corridors realigned almost reluctantly, like the ship had seen enough and wanted them gone. They burst into the docking bay just as the airlock hissed open and Jin yelled, I swear if any of you brought ghosts on my ship, I'm charging extra. Go, 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 Jace shouted, shoving Vexa through the hatch and stumbling in after her. The moment the celestial loophole undocked, the derelict ship behind them folded in on itself. Not imploding, not exploding, just leaving. It vanished with a pop of negative sound, leaving behind only silence and the taste of static. On the bridge, Jace dropped into the nearest chair and said, "Okay, new rule. I don't touch anything glowy unless it offers me snacks first." "You awakened an ancient network of sleeping minds," Loren said from the main display. "We're already picking up signal spikes in 9 systems. Whatever you triggered, it's spreading." "Cool, so I guess we're famous now. Or hunted." Vexa leaned on the arm of his chair. "At least you didn't marry boring royalty." He laughed once, hollow and loud. "That's the truest thing anyone said all week." The celestial loophole was not built for subtlety. It was built for evasive maneuvers, long-range scanning, and, according to Jin, vintage-inspired chaos with a side of regret, which was precisely what it delivered as it punched into dark space, leaving behind the haunted whisper ship and its inconveniently reactivating precursor memory farm. Jace sat in the galley with a cup of something that claimed to be tea and smelled suspiciously like battery acid. Vexa was trying to reprogram the drink dispenser using a wrench and interpretive dance, while Tiki hovered nearby, making disapproving noises. "I'm just saying," Jace said, "if the tea's going to smell like it could dissolve metal, maybe we label it not tea, or caution may induce temporary enlightenment." "It's protein enhanced," Tiki buzzed, "adapted for your inefficient mammalian systems. It tastes like a science experiment that failed and sued its creators." Vexa smacked the side of the dispenser. "I added a flavor cartridge. It was called Bold Morning Lizard. That explains literally everything." The ship shook slightly, not an alarm, more like a hiccup. Jin's voice crackled over the comm. "Heads up, crew. We're passing through a nav storm. Space is doing that thing again, where it forgets how to be polite. Might want to strap in." "Nav storm?" Jace asked. "Localized gravitational distortion," Tiki replied. "Or in simpler terms, space-time indigestion." "So, we're flying through a cosmic burp." "Correct. With lightning. Excellent. Let me just go, not relax anywhere." They strapped in on the bridge as the stars outside twisted into unfamiliar geometries, folding and unfolding like a book being angrily reread by someone who'd lost their place. The nav system blinked again, then flat out asked, "Are you sure about this?" Jin punched in override codes like she was slapping a misbehaving arcade machine. "Relax, I've surfed worse." "You crashed 12 ships, Jace reminded her. "Exactly. I have experience." There was a sound outside the hull like metal dragging on glass, though logically that should have been impossible. The ship twisted slightly off course, and for a brief, unsettling moment, they all felt like they were watching themselves from 3 seconds in the past. "Okay," Jace said. "Was that déjà vu or did time just burp backwards?" "Both," Ilaria replied calmly, not looking up from the console she was reconfiguring. He turned to her. "Why are you so unbothered by all of this?" "Because panic is inefficient," she said, "and because your face is doing enough flailing for the both of us." A soft chime rang through the bridge. Loren's face appeared on the holoscreen, composed and regal even in low light. "We have received a transmission, unsolicited, encrypted, but addressed to you." "Me?" Jace blinked. "Did I sign up for some interstellar newsletter by touching that glowy node?" "Possibly. The message refers to a council of resonance. They're requesting an audience." "Okay, see, that's the kind of thing that should come with context. Who are they?" "Unknown," Loren said, "but their signal contains precursor markers. Let me guess. They want to meet in a shady, poorly lit area known for disappearances." "Correct. A neutral system known as Hespervale." Jin groaned. "That place has the worst docking regulations. Last time I landed there, the station charged me for breathing in too hard." "Tell them we accept," Jace said, against the better judgment of every neuron in his brain. "You're learning," Ilaria murmured. "Or I've given up entirely," he said. They jumped again, this time toward the coordinates embedded in the message. Hespervale was less a star system and more a galactic afterthought, a cluster of dead satellites, burned-out moons, and one very stubborn space station called Refraction Point, which appeared to be held together by duct tape and optimism. The docking process involved haggling with a customs AI that sounded suspiciously like a disappointed teacher. Cargo contents? It asked. Diplomatic delegation, Jin said. Species? Several. Do any of them have unresolved bans or outstanding warrants in this sector? Everyone glanced at Jace. I paid that fine, he said. Eventually, mostly. The AI sighed, somehow audibly, and let them through. They docked in Bay 12, which looked recently vacuum-sealed with repurposed signage from what was clearly a defunct noodle bar. Jace stepped out first, Vexa at his side, Ilaria flanking the rear with a calm readiness that made his skin crawl. They were greeted by three beings draped in robes made of reflective cloth that shimmered with mathematical patterns, fractal embroidery that shifted with every glance. The tallest stepped forward. Its face was obscured by a translucent mask that projected a slow rotation of star charts across its surface. Resonant One, it said, bowing to Jace. Oh no, he muttered. I've been upgraded to a title. You touch the node, the being continued. You hold the echo of memory. You are invited to the convergence. I don't suppose there's an option to politely decline and go back to drinking horrible tea? The being tilted its head. Tea will be provided. Fine, he sighed. Lead the way. They were escorted through the winding corridors of Refraction Point, past malfunctioning vending machines and vendors selling questionable minerals. Finally, they arrived in a chamber that pulsed faintly, not from lights, but from gravitational shifts. Inside stood a dozen other figures like their guides, and in the center, a floating sphere of light encased in a lattice of black metal. It spoke in every voice at once. We are the Rememberers. You carry the echo. Jace cleared his throat. Right. So, what's the return policy on the echo? There is none. You are bonded. The network awakens. You must decide how it reclaims the stars. He looked around. I feel like I missed a meeting, or 12. The precursors did not vanish, the voice said. They were archived, hidden in memory. You began the recovery. By accident, he said. Most destinies begin that way, it replied. Ilaria stepped forward. What do you want from him? To remember, to lead, or to run? The choice reshapes everything. Okay, Jace muttered, rubbing his face. So I've become a space librarian with cosmic responsibilities and 0 vacation days. Welcome, the voice said, to the convergence. Jace stood in the center of the convergence chamber, still not entirely sure if he was dreaming, hallucinating, or had simply developed an allergy to responsibility. The Remembers circled silently, shifting like shadows made of starlight, and the lattice sphere hummed a lullaby he couldn't quite hear, but somehow remembered. Everyone was looking at him, probably because he was glowing faintly. Okay, he said, arms spread slightly. Just so we're clear, I'm not qualified to lead an ancient race of interstellar memory ghosts. I failed out of flight school because I crashed a training shuttle before it left the hangar. Vexa raised a hand like a school kid. You did crash impressively. Thank you. That helps. The echo is not leadership, the sphere said. It is connection. You are the node now. The memories pass through you. They anchor. Great. I'm a living Wi-Fi extender, Jace muttered. Ilaria stepped beside him. Her voice was calm, but there was a warmth to it he hadn't noticed before. You're not the same person who stumbled into this with a stolen key and bad decisions. You've changed. He turned, half grinning. Are you saying you're proud of me? I'm saying your recklessness finally became useful. That's different. Jin's voice crackled in over their comms. Hey, not to interrupt the ancient soul bonding ritual, but there's a fleet forming outside the veil. Not friendly, broadcasting open threats and heavy sarcasm. Jace blinked. Heavy sarcasm? They're calling us scrap chasers and memory thieves. I take offense. The Remembers shifted again. They fear the return. Not all want the past unearthed. Jace glanced around the chamber. So, what do I do? Just beam memories at them until they feel guilty? You decide how the echo spreads, the sphere said. Revelation, preservation, or silence. Your signal shapes what's remembered. He looked at his friends, Vexa adjusting the hidden blade in her sleeve, Ilaria scanning the exit routes, Tiki blinking rapidly as it downloaded every scrap of historical data in range. They'd followed him through haunted ships, broken stations, and metaphysical reruns of a civilization that refused to stay dead. And now he had to make a choice with all of them watching. He turned back to the sphere. Broadcast it. The remembers rippled with approval. Are you certain? Number, but I've spent most of this trip uncertain, and it's worked out weirdly well. Let's see what happens when people remember what they buried. The sphere expanded, light flaring as if it inhaled time itself. Across the room, screens lit up with cascading data, fractals, voice fragments, architecture blueprints, and music so old it brought tears to Jace's eyes without knowing why. The rememberers fed the signal outward. Every relay in the system, every wormhole fringe and forgotten relay satellite, they all lit up. The echo spread like wildfire through the stars. On the ship, Jin swore and laughed at the same time. You lit the biggest signal flare in history. Systems are waking up. Memory nodes, precursor satellites. You just turned on a galactic time machine. Outside, the hostile fleet began to flicker on scanners. But something changed. Their comms wavered. Some ships powered down. A few peeled away entirely. They're seeing it, Ilaria said. Some are remembering. They're feeling it, Vexa added. Precursor design. They built with empathy. The memories carry emotion. Jace sank into a nearby bench, suddenly exhausted. I can't believe that worked. You had help, the sphere said. You were not alone. The chamber dimmed. The remembers began to fade, their work complete. The echo was no longer contained. The nodes scattered across the stars would continue transmitting, teaching, healing. Before the last of them vanished, the voice returned once more. Your role is done, but your journey is still beginning. The chamber fell quiet. Back aboard the celestial loophole, Jace leaned back in his chair and watched as system after system came online across the nav map, each one pulsing with restored memory. Forgotten ruins lit up like lanterns. Abandoned constructs began humming again. Across the galaxy, doors once sealed by time creaked open. I think I accidentally rebooted history, he said. Tiki floated beside him. Correction. You deliberately initiated a cross-system data reintegration sequence resulting in galactic-scale memory cohesion. And also, yes, rebooted history. Glad we cleared that up. Jin turned her chair around with a full 360-degree spin. So, what now? You've jump-started an interstellar renaissance, invalidated centuries of academic theory, and possibly declared psychic war on 3 minor empires. Big Tuesday. Now, Jay stood, stretched, and gestured at the glowing star map. Now we explore. All that memory didn't just bring back history, it brought back coordinates. Vexa grinned. Treasure? Knowledge, Ilaria said. Same thing, Jace replied. Only one of them gets you shot at more. Tiki added, most of the coordinates lead to locations marked unknown, should quarantine, do not touch. Perfect, Jace said. Plot a course. As the ship powered up, its hull humming with restored systems and a faint trace of precursor code now embedded deep in its core, the crew gathered on the bridge. Stars spilled out ahead of them, countless and waiting. The past was awake again, not as a threat, but as an invitation. Jace looked around one last time. They'd gone from fugitives and freelancers to the accidental stewards of a galactic archive, dragging the universe's buried truth back into the light. He smiled. Let's see what we've forgotten next. The end.